Hello everyone, welcome back to Family for Every Child's Conversations on Care podcast. My name is Amanda Griffith and I am the CEO at Family for Every Child. This podcast is a space where we can hear directly from practitioners about how they are providing care to vulnerable children and families around the world. Family for Every Child is a growing network of 47 local civil society organisations working on the ground in 38 countries. These organisations have a wealth of knowledge and experience from years of working with children and communities to develop solutions to improve children's care. In today's podcast, we will be discussing how we can best support the mental health and well-being of children and young people. At Family for Every Child, we know that children who are emotionally well are more likely to develop strong and healthy minds and have better lives in the future. And it is this knowledge that underpins our Emotions Matter campaign. So I'm delighted to be speaking today to three of our member organisations who've been working together to share learnings and develop their practice in this field. Omattie Madray, welcome, is the Managing Director of ChildLinK in Guyana. ChildLinK works to create a society where children are protected from abuse and exploitation, be that physical, sexual, emotional, or commercial. It aims to empower children, families, and communities and support government in order to create the best environment for children's development. Chaste Uwihoreye is the country director at Uyisenga near Imanzi, who I will refer to as Uyisenga or UNM. Uyisenga was established in Rwanda in 2002 in response to the high number of children and young adults who became orphans and heads of their households as a result of the Rwandan genocide and HIV and AIDS. Uyisenga's aim is to build the resilience of children, facilitate their reintegration into society, and to promote their rights in families and communities. And Rita Panicker is the director of Butterflies based in Delhi, India. Butterflies has been working since 1989 to protect and empower street-connected and working children in India. Its focus includes education, healthcare, and media programs. They take a participatory approach, working in partnership with children in 12 contact areas in Delhi, at points where there is a high concentration of street working children, for example, bus terminals, markets, or railway stations. All their programs are delivered through a cooperative approach. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Rita, perhaps I could turn to you first and just explore a little bit more about the whole sort of concept which we're exploring here, and that is that the focus of each of your work is on supporting mental health rather than preventing and responding to mental ill health. And can you share with me really the difference in that sort of focus and emphasis?
Thank you, Amanda. And also thank you for this question because it's very valid. Most often there is a misconception when we speak about mental health that it is mental illness. But that's not what it is. It's mental health wellness. It's emotional well-being. And emotional well-being is so very important for any individual to live a full life. And we have seen that the pandemic really showed it up, that children, adolescents, young person, adults, everyone were under a lot of stress and anxiety, and their emotional well-being was at a very low end. I mean, I think there were statistics globally to say that how many of them were thinking of committing suicide. So when we speak about mental health, it's not necessarily mental illness, but it's about emotional well-being.
Matty, does that resonate with you in terms of the orientation of your approaches?
Thanks, Amanda. It's really an interesting question indeed. And again, thanks for bringing us together to really speak on a very important concern, and really one that we're all working so much on. For us, when we talk about the approaches and the prevention, it's really, part of the focus of the work with the wider within the family and the wider society in itself, really to support children to grow up in safe families without being abused. It's really contributing to children wellness and mental wellness, emotional wellness. It's really about helping wider society as well to have more knowledge and skills to work with children, to protect children within the community, within the faith agencies, within the schools, wherever children will be in their space. When we talk about prevention and supporting, it's about working with all of those stakeholders who will create a safer environment for children to thrive and to in some instances to provide them with additional tools and how to help children to be safe. So, for instance, if we're talking about mental wellness and emotional wellness for children who have been sexually abused, we're talking about a specific intervention so that children can learn to cope with the abuse. If we're talking about mental wellness, about bullying, it's how we help children themselves to know how to respond, know how to report, know how to be a part of the solution.
Thanks, Omattie. And Chaste, would you want to build on this idea, particularly the ones that Omattie has referred to in terms of this importance of interagency working and seeing the different places the child, but the child within the family, the child within the community, and the child within the school setting? Did you have any reflections on that, Chaste?
I think, Amanda, this conversation reminded me when I tried to understand and to test my understanding on mental health, and I found it. I really don't understand what is it, and I got a very good definition from a young adolescent who told me that mental health is a health of the rest of other healths. That was the first definition. The second definition was just the cover of everything in your body, in your health. That's what he called mental health. And he said the rest of other bodies, you can get replacement. You cut your egg can be cut and you get replacement, but for the mental health, there is never replacement. That's really, it's more to prevent rather than to heal. It's really very, very important. And I liked really what Omattie and my dear Rita was saying about what is mental health, emotional well-being, and the other definition I got from a child was that mental health is the internal safety, and the internal safety, and sometimes we have external safety, but the internal safety is very important. And if you don't have internal safety, meaning you will never get the external safety. Of course, as Omattie was saying, the external safety has a very bad impact on internal safety. If in a family setting, you don't have this external safety, meaning the relationship, the cohabitation between family members, meaning a child will never have an internal safety. At the school level, if there is no external safety, if there is no this love, the child will never have the internal safety. So there is interlinkages between those two things, internal and external safeties, mainly for children, because for a child to have those that internal safety, which is mental health well-being, according to that definition of a child, who was saying he need to be loved, he need to be cared, he need to be respected, he need to be protected. So all those different external safety will be able to create the internal safety for a child, which is the mental health well-being of a child. That's what I wanted to add, Amanda.
Thank you, Chaste. And if I sort of summarize this to a little bit, is what I'm hearing from all of you is the focus on strength and resilience and prevention, rather than something that's more a sort of medical approach, which is looking at the illness or reparation. And in many respects, I think as you build on that idea of internal safety and external safety, this is a process of any intervention is to shift that locus of control into the internal, so that the child feels I have that control internally, rather than being dependent on some levels of control outside that then enables or doesn't enable them to feel safe. So which I think is sort of part of what we can explore going forward, is so what are the interventions that build on that strength and enable that resilience and that firmer locus of control internally. And so maybe Chaste, I can come back to you now and sort of say, so in your view, you have explored it a little bit about and saying, you know, as children say, this is the health that's above all health. So if I don't have this, nothing else functions, sort of thing. But can you give me some sort of examples in your context of where being able to work as you do on mental health issues, how that's been led to a change in a child's life? What exactly are you achieving when you're looking specifically at building this sense of well-being?
It's a very good question, Amanda. I like to say that it's a very good and inspiring to work with children, because working with children and young people, it's very easy. It's just inspiring them. It's just facilitating their process. What I realized, I found that children are expert, and what the main achievement I did is just to externalize their expertise and to be able to see that their expertise that helped them to face challenges, to cope with problems they of households. I remember the youngest child I have been working was a 10-year girl who was head of family of 4 children. And now she's a mother of 2 children. So meaning, even if she was head of families, so she have been able to use her expertise to face challenges, to support their brothers and sisters. You know, when I was working with children, Amanda, there is some quotes from children I can really I cannot forget. One of the child told me that it's better to suffer together rather than living a good life separately. That was really a powerful quote from a child when we were just unifying children, getting children out of orphanages and putting children again together. And people thought that in the orphanages, they have food, they have school fees, and the child, I remember it was I think a 14 years old child who told me it's better to suffer together rather than living a good life separately. So meaning that, by really working with mental health, you come up with all, let me say, all strength, all resources that you externalize all those resources that children have, and then you prevent the illness that Rita was saying. You prevent, and the children, they grow up and they become parents. That's the most, let me say, outcome I got.
Thank you, Chaste. And again, you're referring to this really important aspect of the internal and the external and how those interact with each other really importantly. Rita, did you want to add to that in terms of sort of, please?
I would say that, there is, society is changing very fast. It is evolving. And along with that, all our social institutions are evolving, even families for that matter. And we need to look at that and reflect on it when it comes to how do we make families also democratic, and where the children's agencies are respected, and where the parents would, give the space to listen to a child. Now, when you come from a society which is very hierarchical and very patriarchal, it becomes really difficult for a child to have that space. But today, there's no two ways about it. You will have to give that space to that child, because in our experiences, what we have found is that the children are more and more, they are going through a lot of anxiety and stress and into risk behavior, primarily because of the overload of information they're getting from internet. Now, the internet is their virtual world, which is actually telling them, that's their lens, what social relationships should be. What should be the family? What should the parents be saying, about your own personhood, as to what it should be. So it is working at different levels in an individual as understanding, as well as the acceptance of the prevalent norms. Now, the prevalent norms may be saying something, but it is in contradiction to what they are listening and watching on the internet and what their peers are saying. So there is this kind of what I would say, where the children are trying to get, validate themselves in the social media. It's a constant pressure for them. And then the reality becomes kind of myopic, it is so what is real and what is not real? So for that, it becomes very important that our families become democratic, and there is that agency is given to their children to be able to share, to be able to talk, and for the parents to give that space, because now what is happening, the parents don't have the time. They're also hooked on to the internet. Where do they talk? There's hardly any face-to-face conversations we are having with each other. And all that is playing, I would say, it's an adverse impact on the lives of children. And we as practitioners are deeply concerned about it, especially from the age of 13, 14 onwards. The children are in a disarray. It's they really don't know, they for them, the most important thing is my virtual friends and my peer group, and what they say is most important for me. So where is you in it? And that's where caseworkers like us and counselors come in to validate you as a person, to say that you have, you don't need to be validated by 10,000 followers, but you are good enough, your self-image, your body image, everything is fine. Respect your body, respect your emotions, respect your mind, that's who you are. Now, this means that you have to speak of mental health not in a silo. It cuts across. And when you say cuts across, it means in your education program, you're not talking about academic studies alone, but your own emotional well-being should be a part of it. The child should be self-confident to be able to even understand a theory, So for that, you need to, see that the schools are part of it. The education is part of it. And I said families are very important. Communities, the neighborhood, So if we do not have this kind of a larger picture of a continuum of what I would keep saying, a continuum of care, the mental health is also there, even in the neighborhood. If you have a neighborhood which is so violent, what's the impact that will have on the children? So the neighborhood has to keep their community safe and protective for children too. So then, it's very complex. It's so difficult, Amanda, for me to make any kind of a statement, But I would only say, that our society is changing, is evolving. Our families are evolving. I think new theories need to be emerging now because our socialization patterns are changing, human relationships are changing. It's all dependent upon technology. So I think it's time for the multidisciplinary group of sociologists, psychologists, economists, I would say the political scientists, all of them to come in and to see that how do we, what should be how do we kind of come up with new theories to address this, what is happening in our society, what's happening in our socialization of our children in our family. So it has to be looked through a lens which is multidisciplinary and not necessarily from the lens of psychology or psychiatry alone. They are important, but it cannot be only that. You need to look at in a broader picture. If we want to really, really want our kids to grow up with that self-confidence, and I have that self-confidence to cope with their emotions, that is very important, the coping mechanisms.
So you touched, and Omattie, I don't know if you want to add to this, but you touched on two really important, many important things there, but a couple I'll just pull out. One is that the change can't just happen at the individual level, or the support can't just happen at the individual level. It really has to be a whole system, whole society transition. I mean, if anything, because if you don't, then you're going to end up with actually, you supported the child to be different, and yet society is not allowing that difference to come into being. And also referred to this very new context of being online, and this whole thing about sort of what is our reality now. So I don't know, Omattie, if you wanted to build on those two really significant points that Rita's pulled out.
Yes, it's really beautiful how Rita has brought in that whole self of autonomy for the child, connecting that so well with Chaste, looking at it as internal and external, because one of the things that we are doing, and I say we meaning family, is that when we engage children to provide that level of support for their own mental wellness, it's really about what the change that needs to happen now so that they are in a better and safer place, but also in the long term that they're learning to take responsibility for their own mental well-being. Because when we look at when we talk about mental illness, and we look at adults who are who've become so mentally ill that some may have to be institutionalized and take a medication and all of that, it's because one of the reasons is because during their early years, things would have been happening. They would not have been aware of it. They don't know how to respond to it. They don't know when to say, I can't do this anymore. They are ashamed of their body and don't have that level of confidence, or don't know how to report when they're being abused, or don't know how to stop being a bully or being bullied. So it's such an intersectionality when we speak about all of these issues in that we are helping children not for their now and today or for themselves only or for their families only, but really for wider society, because our lives have become so busy where we are in the globe today, in the world today, with so many challenging issues, wars, and children being killed, and so many different issues, and more so for children living in the global in the virtual space in itself is a challenge. And so mental health is really helping a child to understand how they navigate around all of these things that they are growing up with, and helping them to take decisions for themselves that help their own autonomy, to put it in Rita's word.
If I can link this back to one of the things, Rita, that you said, and Omattie, for you to comment on in a minute, is that the mental health, if you think about it, to a large extent, mental health has been very much dominated by Western academics and professional institutions. And I wonder if you feel that there is any cultural or social differences that risk being ignored or misunderstood as a consequence. I mean, so what do you see as the value of looking at the things through a local practitioner perspective when we're looking at mental health? Because, or is it actually generic, and the experiences that of a child will be very similar in the UK as opposed to in Delhi or into Guyana? Or should we be trying to challenge some of the universality of and the Western centricness of mental health provision, and looking at it with more of a societal and cultural lenses across that? I don't know what you were thinking about that. Omattie, if you want to sort of respond to that first.
Yeah, I think the more we think that we are different, we are actually very similar. But of course, it is those cultural and social differences within our own context, whether we be in the Caribbean or Asia or Europe or Africa. We all have our own cultural um, norms and values, and these are the things that makes us have different lenses of how we perceive and understand. Um, but in many instances, the benefits of really how we are addressing mental health. We've learned a lot from the Western academics and professionals, and of course, we 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 don't always understand why we tend to be trailing when it comes to some of these concerns. Perhaps we ourselves in outside of the Western world need to take the lead on some of these issues, and share our own model and our own approaches and how useful it has been, because what we have learned to do well is really to incorporate uh, these traditional values, these social norms that we have sort of depended on, and that has helped us. Something as simple as faith in the Caribbean. If we are doing almost anything within the family, it includes faith. It includes how we connect with with the higher one. And so that is important if you're going to provide some sort of mental wellness support to anyone, or provide any type of services, that you have to meet people, meet children where they're at. What is it that is a part of their everyday lives that is a strength for them? And so we can't necessarily think that the Western world learning or finding or understanding is not applicable, but we have to look at how we can allow those learning to be informing us and then to do our own research. I mean, we don't have a lot of data within our Caribbean context on mental health and mental well-being, particularly when it comes to children and young people. So we know that we have to do more of that. We know that we have to, I mean, the action research, and we will talk a little bit more about it later, but the action research that we have done is something that we really need to share with our wider regional, within our wider regional context, so that we are not just having the data, but we are having the data in a way that we can respond to it. And so I don't particularly see that you know, the Western world maybe has dominated it. Perhaps they have led it in some ways, but the rest of the world is catching up, and really more so in a way that allows our own local context to be sort of the learning for how we respond to children and young people and supporting their mental well-being.
Chaste, I think you've done some work on this, haven't you, in terms of looking at to what extent it's Eurocentric and to what extent within the Rwanda context you need to bring in different perspectives.
Amanda, when you asked that question, you reminded me when I finished my studies, my bachelor's degree in clinical psychology.
Yeah.
And I did all my studies in French and somehow in English. All concepts were defined in your languages, in the Western languages. And I was hired to support children who can even don't speak French and English. The only language they speak is Kinyarwanda, our local language. And it was even difficult for me to define the concept trauma in Kinyarwanda and to tell children what is it, trauma. So it was, first of all, difficult for me as a so-called expert, a so-called professional psychologist. That was the first. And the secondary, the approaches I was studied in schools, most of them were just from Western contexts, the psychoanalysis, the diva, if I can put in children diva and just hear what they're saying, and CBT, all those concepts, you know. And I was a little bit confused as a professional. And that's why I started really to think and to find from our culture and from our traditional, from our proverbs, from our songs, from what we were doing, what should be really the most beneficial for the kids I was supporting. They were survivors of genocide. And from that, I think I started to think, even the article I published supporting survivors of genocide, our own ways, our own prescriptions. So I found really we should get our own prescription, we should get our own ways that are better probably from what I had studied. And I started my second journey of learning from children, from the people I supposed to support. So they started to teach me how I have to support them. So it was really very important. And coming back, that's why somehow I like the beauty of narrative therapy. That's say that people are expert of their lives. We are expert of psychology, we are expert of psychopathology, we are expert of psychiatry, but people are expert of their lives. and children, young people, they are, I like to say, they are artists of their lives. Nobody else can be artist of your life. So an artist is somebody who creates. So I cannot say somebody, a style from Western perspective can come and create my life. I'm the one who is an artist. And the mental health, psychotherapy is like artists. It's like arts. So that's why traditional way, local ways are very important. And I was talking about the language itself. Rita was talking about emotions. I like to say an emotion can never be translated from a culture to another culture. An emotion cannot be translated from a culture to another culture. So that's why we need our local ones, and even basing on a language. That's why I started to think, how can we translate our Kinyarwanda into a clinical applicable language? Because if you study in a Western context, you study clinically, it's English, French, and whatever. Those are the language that are clinical applicable. And when you come to Swahili, to Kinyarwanda, to our language, it was not possible. So that's why really it's very, very important. Culture and local ways, they are very important. And lastly, of course, we learned from Western approaches, and by learning from Western approaches, you forget what our ancestors did and what our ancestors created. And I like Proverbs. You asked me, Amanda, from the work I have been doing, even I have been able, let me say, to challenge the health, let me say, standard, the so-called the mental health guideline, and we include in our health system our traditional models on how we can support, and we include it in the health facilities as guidelines. So it's really a very important point in the mental health, and I like to say the change can never come from outside. The change comes from within, and the within, you are the one who can see you are within, you are internal, and those tools from outside, sometimes they cannot help you to see the within. There is a Rwandan proverb saying, meaning I wrote also an article around that proverb. No one can tell better a story. No one can tell a story better than one who lived it. So you cannot, as the Rwandan who lived the story, I am the one who can tell it better. So that in the mental health, it's a matter of creating a story, sharing a story, but most importantly, creating an alternative story. As a local people, we are the ones who can help people and can work together to create alternative stories.
Beautiful, Chaste. That's absolutely beautiful. And it's funny, you completely reminded me, I started my psychological profession in French and then transitioned into English. And I still sometimes go, there's no word for that in English. I only know how to express that in French. So I can't imagine what it's like when you move into other languages and other cultures as well, because those are quite a kindred, and yet there's still not the capacity to completely transfer from one language to another. Rita, I'm conscious that, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I just very briefly wanted to say that, to answer that question, taking from Chaste and Omattie, it's true that all of us learned the theories that emerged from, emanated from the West. All of us, even I too, did. But as practitioners, what we have found is that we have actually taken the theories and unpacked it. It is we, the practitioners, who unpack those theories and have come up with new theories to say that what is being taught and said doesn't work in our cultural and socio and economic context. So when it's kind of, when you say that as a counselor or a clinician, you have a client and it's a one-to-one, but for us as a practitioner, it's a child and the environment. It's not a one-to-one that we are looking. So we are actually, as practitioners, looking at the theories and unpacking it and coming up with new theories. And it is for us practitioners to really document it and put it down, because the academicians are still teaching us the same old theories, you know. I mean, but we are the ones who are working at the grassroots, with the children, with the families, with the community, with all the agencies and systems, and we are able to see that what works, what doesn't work, you know, and come up with new approaches of working with in the area of mental health and emotional wellness.
So can I build on that a little bit, Rita? Because I was going to ask each of you about your different sort of therapeutic approaches and methodologies. And Shasta's neatly provided us a lot of information about his narrative arts therapy. And I wondered if you, because I'm conscious you actually you work more with a social casework approach. So maybe you could expand a little bit on that. Great.
Well, as an organization, since we work with street-connected children, working children, and with the families and the communities in the school, we found that the most relevant and an effective approach was social casework. Now, what is social casework? It's primarily concerned with the adjustment and development of the individual towards more satisfying human relations, you know. So we work with the environment. So it's a problem-solving model, but does not focus on the deficit and the weakness-oriented practice, but rather look at the strength, and then have a collaborative process where you have the caseworkers, the children, the families, the peer group, and the school as part of your casework, as part of your therapeutic approach. So you're not having just one person who's your client, but the client's problems is factored by the family, by the peer group, maybe by the neighborhood, maybe by the school. So then you would be working with them too, with all these actors, so that the environment which is creating that stress or anxiety in that child is also being addressed and it is being resolved. So it is, I would say it is more dynamic, it is clinical, it is ideological. And we work with the individuals, like, for example, the existing strength of the child is what we would work from or begin with, you know, to address their immediate problems, or social or emotional issues with respect to their microsystem. Now, what is their microsystem? That is your interpersonal relationship, which is experienced by the individual. It could be your parent, it could be your older sibling, it could be one of your friends or classmate in your school. And the exosystem, and that is your environment. That's your neighborhood. That's your extended family. It could be your social media that is causing you that. So that directly or indirectly affects their mental well-being. So Butterflies works with them using the social casework by providing support to the children to solve their problems, which means that we would also work with the family. So family therapeutic care is part of this approach. So you have the child, but you would be working with the family. Suppose the father is the main cause of problems for the child, then you would work with the father. If the father is a strict disciplinarian and who could only see, who could only, point out the mistakes of the child, could never praise him, could never appreciate him, then you work with the father to help him to manage his anger and his violence and violent temper, with a mother and father to have a better bonding and a better relationship, which will affect the children. So you would work with the family too, although your first entry point was the child. But it doesn't remain there. It goes to the environment because the family is one of the cause of it. And it could be the neighborhood, it could be the peer, or it could be the school. It could be a teacher who is causing a lot of stress to that child. Then it would be that, so it's more of to provide a holistic support to the child's mental well-being. And for us, what we say is that strengthen the problem-solving behavior by facilitating dialogue and discussions, help the child to be able to have the confidence to cope with his emotions. There's nothing which is bad. All emotions are important in any human being. You will have anger, you will have frustration, you would have happiness, you can have sadness, you can have irritation. That's why you're a human being. But how do you manage those, and see that it doesn't cause more of a problem to you and your immediate family, is something that one needs to cope and to work with it. And I would say that I'm reiterating it, that the focus for us with the child or with the adolescent would be on the child and their living environment. And that is social casework.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rita. That's really helpful to explain. And Omattie, I know that you at ChildLinK, with your work focused particularly on survivors of child sexual abuse, you use a different sort of approach again, which is you call trauma-based. And that's interesting, trauma-based as opposed to trauma-informed. Maybe you want to explore a little bit about the language around that as well. And cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Can you give us a little bit more detail and texture to that approach?
Yes, thanks, Amanda. We certainly, yes, do need to look a bit more closely as to how we define that the model that we use. We use the trauma focus intervention mainly because it's really it's an evidence-based model. So it's a really focus on a lot of on what we are witnessing before us, understanding from maybe the tools, understanding when a child comes to us as a result of sexual violence, we do an assessment that is based on what the child can explain to us. So the response or the intervention is based on the evidence that the child is giving us. And so this is why we use this particular model, because it's really guided by how the child is and you're again, you're right, it's should be more informed rather than trauma based, but it's really guided by what the child is saying to us through this tool of assessing how they are coping with the abuse that they have experienced, and how it is that they are learning to use the tools to help them to cope. So if we're going to use a tool of thought stopping, how is the child experiencing the use of that tool? Is it working? Does it need another more localized tool? And one of the things that we've been able to do with this particular model is to really assess what component of it is working locally, and what component we need to use more local context tools. So for instance, as simple as rapport building using this model, we needed to use more local activities and referring to more local sports and referring to more local conversations so that you can build that, because the whole basis for being able to help a child who's experienced trauma, it's on building a trusting relationship and helping them to be comfortable in relating and talking and telling. And so this particular model that we use has really been the model designed specifically for this type of intervention for children who've experienced this type of violence. It's structured, so there's about 12 steps, and it deals quite a lot with the post-traumatic stress of the abuse that the children would have experienced. So in cases of extreme trauma and war crimes and accidents, this is one of the model that could potentially be used. Of course, children, everyone will respond to it or will be affected differently. But there's a wide range of tools that could be incorporated. And so this is what helps us to be able to utilize it locally. We can utilize tools that children are more comfortable with, children are able to connect with, and to be able to utilize those tools when they're on their when if they're back home and they're experiencing anxiety. We're helping them to learn tools, how they can actually utilize it at home, within their family life, within their school. And then of course, over time they're learning various ways to deal with the stress. One of the chapters looks specifically at stress management, looking at their psychoeducation, helping them to express how they what they're feeling, but to express that in a way that they can learn to so perhaps put a definition to it in a way that the counselors can help. So it's a bit on cognitive coping and processing, and helping them to narrate that trauma. And Chaste spoke quite a bit on this. And then of course making sure that in that whole process, children are we're not just working with children, but we're working with their families, we're working with their communities, we're helping their network to become more aware and to become more supportive and more helpful, and they too are learning tools and how to be supportive to children, especially children who've experienced some form of abuse.
Brilliant. And all three of those, although they are a different approach, what seems to be the commonality of all of that is the centrality that Chaste said about you are the artist of your own lives, and you've used it in the term, Omattie, that you're the narrator of their own lives, but it's that absolute focus and primordially saying that actually it's the lived experience, and however that child expresses and experiences that lived experience is your starting point, and then from that you will then take slightly different approaches. But also it sounds like all three of you are also sort of saying the beginning and end is not the child, that it is these broader relationships even within the narrative therapy. So if I could, this has been such a rich discussion, I don't really want to move you on towards the closing remarks, but if I could, I wondered if we could then sort of start to move into thinking about, so what does, out of all of these insights and the work that you've been doing, is particularly around the action research that you shared, what would be the things that you would take to another organization looking to develop their work around mental well-being of children and young people? And how would you advise them to identify an approach which really works for their best for their context and in some respects to their organization and their expertise, because each of you has come to a different place, not just because of context, but also because of your organizational history and your own heritage and experience and professionalism. So Rita, do you want to start off on that one in terms of what insights you would share with others as to how they
thank you, Amanda. First, I would like to say that the three of us who did the action research, I think it was a great experience for us, because it was an experience for us also to document our work, but to see where the strengths lie and what are the challenges in our work, you know. So that was very good. And I have to say that the synthesis report will be out in January. So there is a professor who's working on it, and she'll come back in January. So we will be sharing that with all of you. Now, as to what I would look at it is that, Amanda, we get into a comfort zone of being very specialized, you know. We work on girl child, we work with street connected children, we work with child labor, we work with children who are, you know, experience sexual violence, and we kind of, you know, work in silos, you know, and that becomes a major focus of our work. But somewhere along, we are missing something very crucial, and that is mental health, wellness, the emotional well-being. No matter where you are working, if the children and their immediate environment, that is their family, the neighborhood, their peer group, their school, if that is not conducive enough for this child to grow to be I don't want to use the word self-confident, but to say that I am myself, and I'm happy being what I am, and I'm a fulfilled person, you know, I have the resilience with me, and I'll be able to go forward. But to do that, you need to have mental health input or interventions in all your programs. It is cross-cutting. You cannot have it in a silo. You cannot say that, oh, you know, I work in the field of education, and for me, education is very important. Very good. But along with that, whom are you educating? You're educating the children, and you have the teachers, you have the school management, and you have the family, but all of them impact on the life of this child to be able to, you know, to be able to be in a position to be academically, you know, do well, or be happy in a school, or to be able to say that, look, I'm not getting anything out of the school, I better drop out of the school. So you need to have the mental health component in the school. I'm not talking only about having school counselors. School counselors are a one-to-one kind of a relationship with that child. Because I know in Delhi, what happens is that when a child goes to the counselor's room, all his classmates are watching him. And then they're making a lot of, you know, remarks and, you know, pulling his leg. But you need to have a system, what I would say, a safe space in schools, where children can come and with dignity and with respect be able to share their concerns, you know. So you need to create those safe spaces in school too, even if you're only working in education. No, you need to have those safe spaces. You need safe spaces in the community. The primary health centers and the others that you have, a whole lot of learning centers, create a safe space. The family has to be a safe space, a democratic family which respects the agency of the children and listen. So to me, Amanda, mental health is cross-cutting. If you are not emotionally well, mentally healthy, you are not living a fulfilling life. You're not able to enjoy everything that you should be enjoying. And you will not be even be able to contribute what you need to contribute because of that. So I would rest my, what should I say, my case, because anywhere I go, I'm always talking about it. But I think it is a cross-cutting.
Yeah.
And when we say cross-cutting, you should not dilute it. It has to be central, central to our work.
And you're absolutely right. Research has shown it really within the specifics that if the child doesn't have good mental health, they're not able to learn. And then there are behavioral issues in school and things. So absolutely, if you want to create a learning environment, then that is central to the very beginning and end of it. So,
and even for the child to be creative, to be innovative, how will you do that? To have a mind to inquire, for that you need to be, in your mind, you need to be happy, you need to be strong, you need to be a person who's self-confident,
Absolutely. Chaste, I wondered if you wanted to build on this in terms of the insights that you feel you'd like to share for organizations that are looking to develop their work around mental well-being of children and things.
Yeah, I think, Amanda, I will start saying that there is no health without mental health. And there is no safety without the individual internal safety. So if we are just, probably I will repeat what Rita said, but you cannot really create safety families where we want really to place our children without creating family members' individual internal safety. That mental health is a key for all we are doing, from the education. If children they don't feel really safe internally, they will not really study well. I have been working with the reintegration of children, street-connected children, and saying, okay, let us identify families. We do tracing of families, but really, if you trace a family and you don't work on the family mental health, the child you are bringing will never get internal safety. And if you don't work on it, the internal safety of children you are bringing in a family, that child will never stay there. So we are still having, even in Rwanda, I don't know, in India or in Guyana, we are having challenges. We place the children in families. Tomorrow they leave families, they go back to street because they don't have this internal safety there. So that's why mental health is a key in all we are doing. Even in the work we are doing, you can do the business, you can develop the income generation project, but the people you are going to support, if they are not really emotionally safe, if they are not really have those what is internal safety? Is this ambition, that's confidence, it does trust, they will not do those projects you are supporting. So the mental health is a key. As I said, I forgot the other definition I got from children. I don't know if I will be able to translate in English, but they said it's like the mental health is like engineer of the human being. It's like engine of a human being. It's like a driver. We are driven by the mental health. So if you have, even if you have a beautiful car or a beautiful plane, but you don't have pilot, you don't have a driver, that one cannot function. So that's how mental health is. It should be a cross-cutting. That's what I have to tell to them. And secondly, what I have to tell them, working with mental health is very easy. You don't need to have a PhDs. Don't have to have degrees in psychology. You don't have mental health is everyday life. And by working in everyday life, don't think I don't have human resources, I have not studied. It's a matter of seeing how can we organize the life of people. I'm working it. It's a matter of sitting down and develop a program. It's a very, very easy. And finally, I will tell them that with this easiest of mental health, it's very quick to change the mental health lives. It's very quick. Some people think it's sophisticated. It's very quick. There is no rain without an end. So even if people aren't being challenged, you can support them to go through. So that's what I can tell them. And lastly, we need, even if we talked about approaches, narrative therapy, case approaches, CBT, we need an integrative approach. As I said, as psychotherapy is arts, everybody need a style. Everybody needs his style, and everybody needs his color. And so you need to know the colors and the styles of everybody to be able to support them. That's what I would tell them.
As ever, Chaste, you paint beautiful pictures with your words, which is, of course, your skill. And I think what you've really emphasized too is that the one thing to bring to any work with a child is empathy, and that creating of a safe space and trust in the rest to follow. I wonder, Omattie, if I can move you on to, but do add if you wanted to, but to move on to the fact that in May this year, I know that the three of you were able to meet in Delhi as part of Butterfly's amazing international conference on mental health, children and adolescents. This report I've just read, which is very thought-provoking. It's brilliant. And you were there to share your insights and learn from one another. And I wondered how this has helped you to develop your approaches within your own country, because there is this one aspect, it's an interesting conundrum, isn't it, is we learn from one other part of the world, but we need to adapt it and embed it and make it culturally and socially relevant. But we still need to be open to learning from others and exploring and challenging ourselves and being open to say, well, how else can I do things differently? So I wondered, Omattie, if you just wanted to start as your sense of what you took away from that opportunity to be able to hear from both Chaste and Rita's practice, but also I know others that were at that conference.
I think it was such a good conference, and there was so much information and so much learning and lots and lots of learning. But relating a bit more closely to what Rita and Chaste has said is that children don't come to us with a single story. We cannot work in silos. We must have an integrated approach in the intervention. There is a deep harm in thinking that children coming to us for any sort of support, that there is a single story behind it. The intersectionality is great. The complexity is it's very much there, and so we need to bring to the process of when we're talking about supporting and helping and preventing and designing interventions to reach children. What a lot of what we've learned about is Chaste brought a very beautiful expression of the narrative therapy, and we've seen that quite a bit in our own work in doing the research itself. What is it that we're doing that is helping children to tell their stories and to report and to get the kind of help that they need? And what are some of the barriers that we need to improve on? So a simple thing like a child was coming to the center to make their report, and we all took it for granted that children knew what they were coming to the center for. But we found out in that